and thank you for joining us today. My name is John DeLeo from Cal Business Solutions, and today we're going to walk through moving to the cloud, what some of your options are, and really what do you need to know about moving to the cloud when you're talking about moving your ERP to the cloud, and then how do you choose? Because there's a lot of options out there, but there is a lot you need to know. My goal for today is that you come away knowing more about moving to the cloud than you did before this webinar. So hopefully if we can just accomplish that, then we'll be doing well. So we're going to break this into 5 different segments. And my slide doesn't want to move. There we go. So we're going to break this into 5 segments. So Cal is a partner for GP, Dynamics GP. We've been doing that for years. Acumatica and Business Central as well. So we're going to be covering today is what are your options for a cloud migration? And we do have a number of GP attendees, existing clients of ours that are running GP. So we will cover a little bit about GP in the cloud, but the main focus is really going to be on software as a service in the cloud. And that would be Acumatica, Business Central, and other solutions. So what do you need to know about moving to the cloud? Things to consider. What are your options? How do you choose? And then we're going to let Bryan Mullen give his experience with evaluating ERP systems, what he chose, what he found, and his personal experience in that regard. And then we're going to wrap up with a Q&A at the end, as long as we have time for that. If we don't have time for the Q&A, you can always reach out to us. We'll be happy to answer any questions you do have. So don't be afraid to reach out. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. So what are your options for cloud migration? Hosted cloud versus true cloud. Everybody's throwing around the term cloud all the time. When we're talking about ERP systems, a hosted cloud solution would be where you can take basically your on-premise GP and move it to the cloud. What are your options? You can do it yourself or have someone help you to move to Azure. In that case, you still would have an IT staff. You would still have to potentially deal with it. Basically, you're just running on remote servers. So you take all of that infrastructure that you have today in-house and you would move it up to the Azure cloud, thereby, basically alleviating those concerns you have for security and everything else associated to running your own servers in-house. The next option would be using GP and a hosting provider. And Cal can work with you on that. Basically, at that point, you are taking away not only your infrastructure, but many of the responsibilities in a lot of cases of your IT staff as far as what they have to do to help manage GP on an ongoing basis. Some of the benefits, obviously, now you can focus on growing your business. You're not worried about your servers and keeping everything and dealing with all of that. So you're eliminating those costs of buying new servers, related hardware, frustrations, productivity, downtime, any issues like that. Ultimately, you potentially be looking at lower IT costs, right? Especially if you're removing that IT person, if you have one on staff. So your data is going to be more secure, most likely, than it would be today in your own infrastructure. And again, you can give your employees easy access. They don't have to be on site. They could pretty much be anywhere as long as they can connect via the internet. They have access to GP, but it is not what they call a true cloud. So what are your options for a true cloud? Like I said, we offer Acumatica, Business Central, NetSuite is also a true cloud solution, and there are others. Advantages of a true cloud ERP solution. Again, we're talking software as a service. So you're getting everything bundled together. You're getting the software, the hardware, everything that you need to basically run that application. So it's all in that price, right? That whole, everything is combined together. It's all through that provider. So what does that mean? Access anytime, anywhere, as long as you have an internet connection. These are browser-based solutions. They support multiple browsers, most of all the mainstream. So even, you're not concerned any longer about people running Mac, right? Because Safari is going to be a supported browser. So you've got that capability there. So the other things it will do for you is it gives you that mobile apps. They all have mobile apps to basically be able to run on like a phone, a small device. Certainly tablets, these solutions give you the ability to do responsive design, they call it, where it will shrink and grow to the size of your screen that you're showing it on. Obviously, if I connect Acumatica or Business Central to my phone directly, it's a small platform, so it's not going to be ideal, but certainly the mobile apps work great there. Connectivity to other cloud-based solutions. So once you're in the cloud, these solutions that are true cloud solutions are designed for connectivity. You have the ability to cross and integrate other solutions much more easily than you would a legacy or an on-premise solution. So security, uptime, disaster recovery are all included as part of this process. Seamless updates, upgrades, enhancements, they're all going to be regularly getting updates. Like I mentioned previously, responsive design, it's going to adapt to your screen size. Scalability. This is a big one for many people, right? How quickly can we scale up? Should we go on an intense growth path? I mean, there were some businesses that when COVID hit, went from $10 million companies to $30 million companies right away, just because they happened to be in the industry that helped bring everybody into the COVID world as we knew it, right? So that scalability of being able to just, okay, I need more, I can just order it. Now I have more availability. So it alleviates those, okay, how do I don't have to replace all my servers. I don't have to add new servers. Basically, it's immediately available to you. So that is huge in that type of environment. Minimal IT support and infrastructure. I mean, so at that point, you're not concerned about really your solution, your security. It's all being handled by these true cloud providers. So what to consider when you're moving to the cloud? SaaS pricing models. There are different models. You need to be aware of the different pricing models that are out there. Most are based on concurrent, based on name user, not concurrent user licensing. For our existing clients with GP is concurrent, right? So if I have 50 actual users, I've only licensed 30. The first 30 to log in have those seats until someone else logs out. No one else can get in there. It's ideal when you're running multiple shifts, infrequent users, right? You don't need to buy a full license for that user. They can just get in when they want. That's not true with most SaaS solutions. If it's a user-based pricing, they need to have their own license, right? So if I have 30 users, and that person's not logging in, they still have a user that's assigned them. Until I remove them and put somebody else in their place as that user, right? And that's part of it, because the platform, they can log in from not just a computer, I can log in from my phone, I can log in from pretty much anywhere, right, to get to that application. So therefore, keep in mind, when it's user-based pricing, we're talking named users. So Business Central is a good example of that. Business Central does have different levels of user. So full users versus Teams users. So team users, you can see in the example, are only $8 a month. They can't do very much other than run reports. That's really the extent. They can get data out, but they can't really do anything else. They could be part of an approval tree, which would, if that's all they had to do, they could do that. Anything outside of that, you'd be stepping up to $70 a month, and you'd see the modules you get there. And then at the premium level, you would be adding manufacturing, service management, and other capabilities. So, but again, that is user-based pricing. So those named users. Different pricing models. Transaction, volume-based pricing. Acumatica offers unlimited users with a commercial transaction-based volume. So how you would view that is, it's like electricity for my house, right? I pay for what I use. Doesn't matter if I have 2 people in the house or they have 10 in the house, I only pay for what I use. Acumatica takes that one step further. When they're doing that, is they only take your highest commercial transaction volume. So a commercial transaction would be an invoice, a payables invoice, whatever is going to be my highest quantity. They're going to look at that and say that's how they would grade you as far as a business is concerned, right? Do I do 100 invoices a month? Do I do 1,000 invoices a month? Obviously, the bigger the company, the more requirements typically, the more transaction volume, the more server requirements they have. Again, they're providing the entire solution. So you've got server, software, infrastructure, everything is being provided. So the more you ratchet up how much you're using the system, the more obviously you're consuming, therefore the cost is going to be higher. Then you have modules, module-based pricing. So that varies based on, again, what do I need? So we went back to Business Central, you only had two different choices there, right? Acumatica provides a significantly more amount of choices as far as using and paying for the modules you truly need. If you don't need field service, then why pay for it, right? So keeping that in mind, and that varies greatly between the ERP providers that are out there. So you really need to hone in on what are your business requirements, because don't get it if you don't need it today, unless you're planning on implementing it, right? There are many people that come to us and want to know, well, what would it be if I add field service? What would it be if I add CRM? Well, if you have nothing today, first get over the hurdle of moving to a new ERP solution before you consider trying to, eat the elephant. You can always add these modules later as you grow. Again, these solutions are designed for that. Change your license model, your subscription, add that module, implement it, on you go. So most ERP solutions have transaction limits over their base licensing. Keep that in mind. Additional subscription costs as your transaction volumes grow. So perfect example, NetSuite has service levels or tiers where they combine not only your transaction volumes with your user counts to determine your subscription costs, which unfortunately they don't really usually focus on that in the sales cycle. They usually would just put you in at the lowest as long as you're under 100 users. Well, okay, well, they're not talking to you though that you're limited on the number of transactions you can do and the number of transaction lines you can have. So it gets very complicated, and you really, if you're looking to move to the cloud, you need to make sure you know what you're dealing with. Data storage, another big aspect, right? Again, they're providing all the infrastructure, all the hardware and the software solution all together. So when you're talking about data storage, how much data do you need? How much data space do you need, right? Typically, again, the larger company, the more users, the more space it requires, there are going to be additional costs if you exceed the minimum space that's provided with your subscription. And so now some of the solutions have options where you can offload some of your expensive data space that's used by the ERP solution to other solutions. So Acumatica does this, where they offer you the option to save your attachments, images, your file attachments, anything like that, out to Amazon, Azure, blob storage, or even a local folder. So that's in the solution itself to, again, help you to, if you're a company that's constantly taking pictures of what your techs are doing or whatever the case might be, that pictures take up a lot of room. So therefore, pushing that off to a lower cost storage solution is going to benefit you, where therefore it's not included in your ERP disk space. So example, Business Central includes 80 gigabytes of database storage for when you buy their user-based solution, right? Because it's priced based on users. And then they give you, for each additional business user, if it's a central, you get 2 gigabytes additional, and if it's a premium user, then they're going to give you 3 additional at no extra charge. But beyond that, you then would need to buy additional storage if you need it, again, because they're providing that storage to you. Now, NetSuite, this is the one that's probably the most different, and typically when they're approaching this with a sales process, most of the time they're quoting standard service tier, which accommodates up to 100 users. It has 100 gigabytes of storage. Now, Business Central, if you only had 5 users, you're getting 80 gigabytes. And then this is the big one that really can run into a lot of trouble with a lot of people, is monthly transaction lines. So they average that over the most recent 6 months. And now we're talking transaction lines across like over 80 different transaction types. So if you just think about that, 200,000 divided by even 20 days in the month, I mean, that's not a lot of space if you're doing a high volume of transactions. So, and the jump from standard to premium can be quite expensive. And of course, at that point, then they say you can accommodate 1,000 users and you get 1,000 gigabytes. And of course, then you get 2 million lines. So when we're talking about NetSuite or any other solution out there, you have to know what's in what they're proposing before you sign on dotted line, because once you sign on the dotted line, you now have this contractual commitment, and they're going to come back to you and ask for, hey, you've exceeded the threshold over X period of time. We need more. Concurrency limits. This gets a little bit deep, but for people that are integrating their cloud platform to other solutions, because again, that is part of the benefit of being in the cloud, is that you can do that. So how many concurrent web services are you allowed at one time before they start backing up? At the lowest tier levels, you don't get very many. So therefore, your throughput, if you're connecting all these other solutions out there, can be very restrictive. So you need to know that. NetSuite normally doesn't discuss this in part of their sales process, but it's at the standard level, it's very low. Therefore, again, if you're trying to connect a lot of different outside solutions or doing a lot of imports or anything like that, these processes are going to get stacked up behind each other in a line. Everybody's waiting. Again, not good if you need real-time information. And then, of course, some of the cloud ERPs combine all of these different pieces, so data storage, your number of web services or API active, your data storage, your users, all of this combined to come up with what ultimately you'd fit into for your actual subscription. Maximum line counts, that can be different by solution. So Acumatica does have a maximum line count on the different transactions. So at the lowest level, I believe we're currently at 1,000 lines for certain transactions. And then the next level that goes up. So again, you have to know what your numbers are when you're talking about going to a SaaS model. You need to know not only the number of transactions, the type of transactions you have, the total number of lines across the transactions that you're currently doing, which is hard to identify, and then what your maximums are. Because once you hit that maximum on a transaction, either you need to bump up a tier, changing your subscription, or you've got to adjust your business to not hit that level. Not easy to do. The way Acumatica does it is they look, and if you've over a 12-month period, if you've exceeded that limit 2 times, 2 consecutive months, I believe it is, then they'll be saying, we need to have a conversation about you upping your limits. So your core ERP functionality, obviously Business Central, Acumatica, GP, right? They all have certain functionality that's included in the solution, but then almost every business ultimately needs some other solutions that are not part of that core solution that you've already had, right? Which is going to add to your total cost. So examples of that would be sales tax providers, shipping solutions, EDI, and they both have a very large, what they call ISVs, independent software vendors, or partner solutions. The different ERPs will call it different things, but at the end of the day, you really need to hone in on what is it that the solution provides out of the box, and what do we need to go outside the box to get all of the functionality that we truly need for our solution. And Acumatica has something called the marketplace, which lists all the different, most of the ISVs that are out there. There are other ones that may not be on that list that are also developing applications for Acumatica. ISVs typically for Acumatica are going to be, for the people that are running GP, are more similar to the GP ecostructure, where it's basically added to your Acumatica instance, and now it looks like it's part of your Acumatica. GP does the same thing for add-ons for GP, right? You install it, it's part of GP. It looks like it. You didn't even know that it's an actual add-on. Business Central approaches it a little bit differently. They have an app source store, and basically you can go and you can download a free trial on many of these. You can purchase it. Keeping that in mind, you really need to know, is this something that I want to put into my environment? So when we're talking about either one of these, you want to make sure that you have the ability to have a sandbox environment. So sandboxes are important because now I'm affecting my production. Do I want to adversely affect my production? And sandboxes kind of go along the lines of upgrades as well, which we'll talk about in a minute. So if you're coordinating it with your upgrades, it would make sense there, but you got to make sure that you're not just allowing any user to go ahead and install an app from the Business Central store and install it in your base, because it really is, if they've got the security access, it is that simple. And this is just a quick snippet of some of the ISVs that are out there for Acumatica. Some of these, for the people that are running GP, would recognize some of these names like Rockton, Avalara, obviously Taxes. So there are many of the ISVs that are out there cross many platforms now, right? They're in that space, and part of the benefit of working in the SaaS model is that they are usually easier to work with some of these new SaaS ERPs than they are the more legacy solutions that were out there. All right, so what do you need to consider when moving cloud ERP updates and upgrades? This is a big one. So it's going to happen. It's not a question of, do I have to upgrade? No, it's a question of, when do I have to upgrade? And each solution is different. So it's critical that you're aware of whatever solution you're looking at. How often do these updates occur? Well, what does that mean to you? Well, it all depends on your implementation of the ERP, right? If I do a very vanilla implementation, then I could do some very simple testing and I'm probably good. If I've got a very complex ERP implementation, I've got customizations, I've got ISV products. You add all those into the equation, now you need to know, okay, not only do I have to be prepared to test, I have to make sure I'm planning for it, scheduling it. I need to know what my risks are as far as, what's the chance of something going wrong during the upgrade process or after the upgrade that I didn't catch, and is it a showstopper for my business? So Acumatica, Business Central, NetSuite all release 2 major releases a year. They have minor hot fixes throughout that period of time, but they do 2 major releases per year. Now, Acumatica approaches this differently than Business Central or NetSuite in that you have options. So Acumatica releases 2 releases a year, an R1 and R2, they call it. And so they have something called the Always Current program. So new clients for Acumatica would be signed up for the Always Current program, which means you're automatically going to get updates applied. You're notified 120 days out. So you have time. Time is critical when you're talking about, if you're more in complex environments, having the time to be able to plan and test before I have to actually have my production environment upgrade. You do have the option with the Always Current program to only have 1 upgrade per year for a small fee in that model. Outside of that, for anybody that's not in Acumatica's Small Business Edition, which is their smallest tier, if you're not in Small Business Edition, then you have the option to opt out of the Always Current program and you fall into the Flex program. So Flex does have an additional fee for the Advanced Edition, but it is included with the Enterprise Edition. Again, the larger the company running Enterprise Edition, most likely you're going to have a more complex environment. Therefore, your testing and your planning for your upgrades is going to be a regular process. So if we look at this chart over here, Always Current updates automatically managed monthly. Your timing 0 to 4 months. You do get a free 90-day sandbox again. So you've got 3 months essentially to get that put in your request for sandbox. From the time you request it, you got 90 days to do your testing and then schedule your production. If your testing goes well, you just ask them to upgrade your server, your production environment. You tell them when you want it done, and usually it's done within a few hours, if or less, for the actual upgrade process to happen. So the recommendations for Always Current is that you're low code, no code, right? So Acumatica does have an initiative to do low code, no code customizations, and that would fall into that, right? And then you have your ISV solutions that are out there, and there are some ISVs that are certified as Always Current ISVs, meaning that they certify their solution will work for that upgrade, R1, R2, whatever it might be. They're certifying that their code has been tested and is ready to go, and your maintenance costs are included there. When we get to the Flex program, you'll be involving your partner, scheduling it. You have up to 18 months from a release. So if I'm on, 23 R1, I'm not really potentially having to look at an upgrade until 18 months out. So you've got more time, flexibility, making sure that you get everything covered. And that's a big piece of when you're considering the size of the solution, the complexity of the solution, having to be on that constant upgrade wheel of, okay, I've got another upgrade coming. Every 6 months, I've got an upgrade coming and I've got to test and get that in. And then, okay, start planning again. So you do have the flexibility of moving that window around. So if you're, you're not going to obviously want to do it in the busiest time of the year for your business. So if you have true customizations with Acumatica, that's usually going to want to consider being part of the Flex program. Again, more control. And then again, the number of ISV solutions that you have would also impact that. All of it is important in trying to figure out what ERP solution, because there's ultimately no cost for the upgrade as long as you're in the time frame, right? That's all included in your subscription, but there's costs on your side as the actual business running the application, right? You've got to have cost for people time to test and thoroughly test and, develop that test process. Again, we could help you with that process, but ultimately, it's on your team to make sure that they are aware. Now, when you get the upgrades, it's not just an upgrade for nothing. You're usually getting many new features as well. So there's features as well as fixes. Business Central, slightly different approach. So major updates, again, still twice a year. They call them waves, wave 1, wave 2. Release notes are available around 90 days before. You have a shorter window of time. You've got 30 days before the release where you can create a sandbox and test. And you can push out only as far as 60 days before Microsoft will automatically upgrade you. So here's a kind of a simple window from example from 2021. Updates available on April 1st. When you get notified about that, you have to go into your portal, your communication portal with Microsoft, say, I don't want to be upgraded on April 8th. If I miss that window, then now you could potentially get it automatically applied, right? So you have to make sure you are controlling that window. And then you have up till June 1st to schedule that update. Otherwise, it's going to automatically get applied. Microsoft's minor updates for Business Central. come out the second week of every month, minor enhancements. Usually it's just hot fixes. And you only have a max of 30 days before they'll automatically apply that. So again, you've got a tighter window. More complex environments, you really have to stay on top of these things. NetSuite, twice a year, all customers, they roll it out in phases, like they do, I think it's 10% first, and then they do like 30%, and then they do the final 60% of their customers. And you'll get notified of when that update is going to occur. You have a small window of time that you're going to be able to, usually it's only a few weeks, to see the preview of that solution. Now with NetSuite, if you truly want a sandbox environment, you'll have to pay for it. They do give you a pre-release where you have that small window of time that you're able to test with. Again, so if you're on that cycle and you've got a complex environment, now you really have to have everything planned out to the T to make sure that you're not running into a situation where it's detrimental to your business. So in recap, upgrades and updates, new features are great. And we see them all the time. The new features, many people love them, right? And that's why you want to stay on that upgraded path, but you need to know your risks and what are the potential risks for upgrading. So that way, and you can plan for it, you can work through that process. So how do you choose? Obviously, you need to know what the solution you're looking at offers you. Does it have the features and functionality you need? Example would be payroll. Acumatica now has payroll. Business Central does not have payroll, but Business Central has ISVs that do offer payroll. So when we're talking about the solution, again, Acumatica, if we go back, it's module based, so you can buy the modules you need. It is not user-based, so therefore you can certainly have as many of your people in your organization that need access to that data can have it. And it's only going to be based on the number of transactions that you're actually putting through it, combined with the modules that you're using. Business Central, different approach. User-based, again, the app store is where you're going to have the majority of those solutions that are adding to what Business Central doesn't offer. Now, in the Microsoft space, they're going to try and keep you in that stack of Microsoft solutions. Acumatica is a little bit different in that regard because they give you a little more choices. So Cal has chosen to offer Business Central and Acumatica. They're both true cloud ERPs, very different pricing models and functionality. So we have tools that we've created for GP. So the critical piece of any migration to a new platform has to do with the fact that you have to get the data out of your existing system, transform it to meet the needs of the new ERP system that you're going to be able to really be able to stand that environment up and move to the cloud and not miss a beat for your business, right? It's a major undertaking. You can't diminish how much work it can be. Obviously, the benefits are not just moving to the cloud. Your benefits are you've got to have a business reason why you're leaving your existing system, and your company should be better for it. That's got to be critical. Cal currently runs Acumatica in-house. At one point, we ran GP for a very long time. I think it was 18, 20 years. And we had 5 different systems that we were using. So now they're all in one solution because Acumatica gave us that. We do have an ISV product that helps to add on to the functionality for Acumatica. So again, it's important that you're aware of what your business needs are and how does that align with the ERP solution you're looking for. Does it have what you need? And that's critical. So you need to make sure that you're aware of all of that. And with that, I wanted to give Bryan Mullen an opportunity to share his experience and his independent analysis of ERP solutions, and kind of enlighten not just from our perspective, but from Bryan's as well, what he's seen.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. Just wanted to, as John indicated, share some of my real life experience as a consumer of ERP systems. So I'll share with you the experience that I had as the COO of Lifeway Mobility. So that business actually conducted 2 separate ERP evaluations since our initial purchase in 2018. When we first implemented an ERP platform, we were looking to consolidate multiple loosely coupled applications into a single system, just like John indicated was occurring at Cal. And at Lifeway, we had many disparate systems. The legacy environment had grown organically from our startup days and had become inefficient and really prone to human error. There was a lot of duplication of effort, redundancy of data entry, et cetera. And we were operating in 4 distinct office locations when we first made the choice to move to ERP. Our initial selection, we focused primarily on the ability to consolidate those systems. And we looked at 2 things. We looked at the lead to cash workflow, and we looked at the licensing model. Those were really the key differentiators. Last year, we reassessed to ensure the platform we chose would sustain the accelerated growth that we had experienced and not become a bottleneck for the expected future growth. So the reassessment really was focused on efficiency and scale. We were looking at field service capabilities. We did an in-depth review of that and looked at how can we streamline processes to a single path and eliminate variation. In fact, the scale was the trigger that caused us this reevaluation, and we had grown from 4 locations in 2018 to 22 locations in early 2023. And that's critical. I'll come back to that growth in a little bit. But when we talk about pricing, we did that growth expansion and we did not have to change tiers. Now, in both cases, the evaluation compared Acumatica and NetSuite, and we, in both instances, determined that Acumatica suited our business need more specifically. So I'm going to touch on quite a few of the things that John mentioned to share my experience. And so why the cloud solution? And it was really about elimination of infrastructure costs. We are running a middle tier business and have a $0 IT infrastructure footprint. We literally have no servers. We have no hardware or software upgrades within our premise. We don't have to manage VPNs. We are platform agnostic. We don't care whether people have Apples or Chromebooks or PCs, laptops, it doesn't matter, tablets. And we have a very lean IT organization. In fact, for a 300-person operation, we simply had 1 end user support person, and then 1 individual that was doing some web applications, some customer-facing applications external to the ERP platform. We enabled all of our locations to use a single hosted solution, and we enabled that work from anywhere capability. Fortunately, we did that right before COVID impacted all of us. So we had virtual software as a service applications, including our telephone system. So everything, every office function or business function we needed was accessible through a browser. And one of the hidden benefits of this, and John mentioned or touched on this, was that we had the ability to easily integrate other hosted services. And this positioned the company for capabilities that we don't even know that we need yet. And at the time we went to this cloud, we had not envisioned some of the capabilities that we would take advantage of. So that's why we chose a cloud solution. Now, specifically why we ended up with Acumatica, the selection criteria really fell into 4 categories. The core functionality, the platform extension, the total cost, and what I call back office considerations. And I'll just touch on each of these briefly. So probably the highlight on core functionality, you really need to dig in. All the basic business functions are touted as being included in every ERP platform, but they are not the same. So as an example, our business was a distribution and installation service working in consumers' homes to install equipment. And so the field service capabilities were critical. That was one aspect that NetSuite just didn't have a solution for. They just didn't have a good alternative. Whereas Acumatica has a module that is specifically dedicated to field service. Now, is it the best field service module? Is it how I would have made it? Probably not. But it definitely put Acumatica ahead on that scale. We also looked at the lead to cash. So I would really stress that, as I'm sure all of you do, your business needs, but you really needed to be able to articulate those very specifically. As an example, we needed to be able to have an atypical process where we scheduled a work order for a potential customer before we even did a sale. And we had to do that because we need to go to that home and do an evaluation. So the flexibility of that ERP system of Acumatica allowed us to make some changes in workflow without customization. And that's a critical aspect. And then, of course, things like inventory control that's appropriate to your business, or the level of bill of material details or scheduling requirements, those were critical considerations. And then ultimately being able to support all of the transaction types. So we did sales, we did rentals, third-party payments, being healthcare related, we were concerned about potential insurance coverage. So we wanted to make sure that the solution supported all of those. So I would group all of that under core functionality. Platform extension is really the ability to do the add-ons. So John mentioned the app stores that are available. Highly recommend doing your evaluation with knowing what you can do in terms of configuration only as your first option, third-party add-ons through those always current or certified application providers, and then finally as a third or last step, a pure customization. And the reason is they will absolutely impact your total cost of ownership and complicate your ability to do upgrades, which gets into the third criteria, which is really cost. And I think John did a really good job of touching on the cost. The licensing model is critical. I mentioned earlier that we moved from 4 locations to 22, and we did not modify our resource tier within Acumatica. We stayed on the same, and in fact, today, Lifeway is on the same resource tier that we started with, even after experiencing that growth. And that was important to us early stage because we wanted to know what those triggers are. So if any of you are considering any of these products, just really, I would recommend you understand what the triggers are that impact licensing modifications, and be aware of year one promises. There's some companies that'll do aggressive year one pricing, but it reverts back to year 2, or it'll revert back to standard pricing if you go outside of a particular tier level. So it's very specific. And then John also mentioned the hidden costs, which I would include in things like storage fees or data extracts. Back office considerations, I would recommend that you do not overlook the 4 basic back office considerations. 1, access to your data. And again, John touched on most all of these, but how do you get it and what form is it in? If you can do a data extract in a relational database format, that's an absolute insurance policy against modification or upgrade considerations in the future. If you get data in a flat file, or you can't get it at all, or it's in just a blob format from the vendor, it really limits your future ability to move. Second of the back office considerations is cloud limitations. I personally think it's important to be able to leverage bundled pricing with certain platforms. I'm a Microsoft guy. I want to be operating on the Azure platform, and I want to make use of integrations that are native to that particular platform. If you prefer AWS or Google, I would recommend that you look at a solution that can be hosted on those in those clouds. And storage limitations, which add to cost, as I mentioned earlier, really become a non-issue if you're using storage in the pure cloud environment, because the storage in the cloud becomes pretty inexpensive, whereas storage from the ERP vendor is really astronomical. John also mentioned upgrade management, and it was important to us to know, who dictates your upgrade process. I always wanted to be in control of when I upgrade, what the business timing is, what is my busy season. I don't want a company to be able to tell me that I have to upgrade on August 1st when August is my busiest time, and I may have issues after an upgrade because of either customizations or some new feature that I have to train all of my staff on. And then lastly, the last back office consideration is future of the platform. So I did see some comments around end of life for GP. I'm not familiar with that product, but it speaks directly to this future of the platform concept, which is the platform in its sunset mode? Is it being heavily invested in? What is the back office from a supplier side look like? Are they heavily investing? Are they growing? Are they adding new features and functions? Is there a growing community? And so with that, I will just turn it back over to John, and it looks like we might have some questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brian. That was great. A couple other mentions that I didn't have a slide on, or so in thinking about that, so obviously Business Central, you are tied to the Microsoft Azure cloud. You can run it on premise, but again, it needs to run in Azure. So you're tied to the Microsoft stack. With Acumatica, they host in AWS. You do have the option if you wanted to host it in Azure, but that would be additional on you to make that choice. Their solution includes AWS. Obviously, NetSuite, owned by Oracle. It's in Oracle. You're not going to be able to make any choices there. So Acumatica does give you some more options and choices to again, be able to keep control over what you want control of, right? So just keeping that in mind when you're talking to an ERP solution, making sure that you know what your options are. So do we have any questions in the last 10 minutes? Is anybody that is attending, can someone say something?
Eric, I don't have access to unmute them, so can you make sure they're all unmuted?
Yep, working on that right now.
Okay.
And so right now, what you're seeing on my screen while he's working on that is Business Central. Business Central and Acumatica both have a way to have a free demo environment. So in Business Central case, you can literally just go sign up, and they're going to give you this Kronos USA, and you'd be able to sign up for it, and you would have this demo environment available to you. So this is an example of responsive design where this is on the browser. That one's in Edge, and then this is Acumatica. There are some other key features that Acumatica provides that we feel strongly as far as the platform is concerned. So both solutions have report writing capabilities and be able to create your own reports and things like that. Acumatica has something called generic inquiries, and that is a significant difference with many other solutions because, as Bryan can speak to, generic inquiries basically give you the ability to create your own. Essentially, for anyone who's familiar with SQL queries and such, you're essentially creating your own queries, able to create your own, essentially your lists, kind of like in GP world, smart list. If you're able to create your own smart lists, pull that data together, because keep in mind, when you're hosted, you don't have access to SQL. You can't go just create your own SQL queries. It's on you to then have a way to do so. Business Central, that is a little more difficult. Again, you're usually going to an add-on, and E1, which made Smart List Builder back in the day for GP, is an add-on for Business Central, just for that reason. Whereas in Acumatica's case, generic inquiries are the way that you can pretty much create any data and show it the way you want to. And you can see down here, this is actually a generic inquiry list down here where it's color coded and such. So you can create your own, in Acumatica, you can create your own dashboards. Again, that's not the case in Business Central. You would need to go and you can add a dashboard pack, or it would be a customization to create additional dashboards. So again, feature functionality that you might not think about when you're first looking at it, because you're looking at modules and how those modules work is, but ultimately, how do I get a data out of that solution to run my business? I see we have some people unmuted. I don't know if anybody has questions.
I guess I'll jump in. This is Bryan Retired, I work for Insuritas. What kind of lift are you looking at moving from GP to Acumatica?
It really depends on, obviously, again, we have tools to get the data out of GP. So no matter what ERP solution you go to, it's going to be a lift. We feel that going to Acumatica is probably a lesser lift for us to take a GP client to Acumatica, is because we can just, again, we have, as long as we have access to your SQL, we can grab the data, and we have import scenarios, and Acumatica's have built-in import tools. So you're not having to buy extra tools for that purpose. So we just basically have our templates already set up, and we can import that data in. So you bring in your master records. Another aspect that is important to ask when you're talking to other ERP solutions is, what can we do as far as historical data? So Acumatica has this feature called migration mode, where we literally can bring in certain, like, sales history, right? Essentially, you can bring in the sales history all as paid invoices in migration mode. It doesn't create any journal entries and do anything else. It just, but it puts it right in the actual tables that you would be using when you actually go live. Business Central has a slightly different approach where they can migrate that data over into basically they're just data tables. They're not part of the actual core tables themselves, and you have to just go search it. So you have history. But again, it's still a migration. There's no, there's a lot of training, a lot of learning for all users to be able to make sure that they're able to use the new system and run your business. And so again, it's a big lift. Not going to diminish it.
How about migrating reports from Management Reporter over?
There is no migration path for either solution. So you're recreating those. I can tell you that both of these solutions have a very similar concept of row sets, and so therefore it's very familiar in both cases, and they're pretty easy to work with. So it's not that piece is easy for a lot of people to be able to recreate, and depending on what your reports look like, Acumatica has a solution called Velixo. It's an ISV product, but it's a certified product, and that one can be a game changer for many people that have to produce. If you've got, let's say, in the over the dozen number of financial reports that you have created, and you got all these different metrics that you're looking at and everything else, that can be a game changer for many people.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
John, there's a question in the chat window about speaking to the security of switching to the cloud. Do you want to address that, or would you like me to?
Would you please?
Sure, happy to. So George, the profile, I am very focused on cybersecurity. Having spent quite a few years in healthcare as the CIO of a Centene subsidiary, my focus has always been on cybersecurity, specifically around HIPAA and the level of detail and care needed there. I was absolutely confident in the Acumatica security posture that is provided within the scope of the AWS hosting. I mentioned earlier, I'm a Microsoft guy, and I like to have everything in Azure, and we were moving there. That hasn't completed yet, but that was on the plan. So from a security perspective, I think you're actually better off, depending on what your local resources are, than trying to do it internally. If you have any attack vectors into your organization, I would say it's probably less secure on premise than in an AWS cloud.
Anyone else have anything you want to put in the chat if you're not unmuted?
John, I just wanted to speak on the about the lift. I mean, every conversion is different, but you know, if you're let's say a financial management services company, and we're talking about the core modules, AP, GL, banking, and let's say receivables. The migration for an organization like that is much more simpler, than, let's say, for example, if you're a business that does, distribution, where, you have to, look at, operational picking, packing, and all of those areas. So the lift can be very different depending on it. And I did also want to speak to the security part of it, you know what I mean, as far as your data. Your data is your data. And, with other than Acumatica, you really don't have access to the fact that you can get to your data in a let's call it a database format. You literally are going to get more of a blob or a comma or tab delimited. So I think everybody has concerns about, their data. It's important that your data is, is your data. And, I just wanted to speak to that point.
Yeah, and to that point, George, thank you. Acumatica does give you this free 2-user license where you could literally put that on a laptop and you can take a snapshot of your environment from Acumatica, and as long as everything matches, you'll be able to restore that, and you have now all of your data in Acumatica, basically able to run on a laptop. So if you were ever, again, that's something that when you're talking to ERP solutions, you want to make sure if your business model changes and that ERP solution is not really working for you any longer, if you're locked in, it's now a much bigger lift to go anywhere else because you can't get your information back. So owning your data is important. Well, with that, if no one else has any questions, if you do, please reach out to us. Otherwise, I want to thank you for your time today.
I thank you guys.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
You too.